Heart. Mountain. Good morning, Angie. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you today, Daniel?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I got a real good night's sleep. Everybody's been sleeping a little more deeply in my family, which makes for a more peaceful life.
Yeah, it always does. Let's go. So my first question was, how does yoga help people and what exactly does it do?
So start when we're understanding something that doesn't initially come from our own culture. It's good to start with where they are, right? Yoga means union with God. Pure, simple. And so you really should know that yoga is more than the poses. There's a lot more depth to it than that. I immediately want to say my perspective rather than trying to articulate what yoga is, because I think something is lost when we're embracing a gift from another culture, if we're sort of trying to be that other culture. Nobody in India who practices what we know of as yoga grew up in the United States and had to deal with the unique challenges of integrating a foreign set of beliefs. So there's a lot that comes naturally to someone in that culture that isn't natural for us. From there, though, it's important to respect the world has always existed in relationship to each other. Now, I know this might feel like, oh, whoa, macro view, but it's really important. The world has always existed in relationship to each other, even when there wasn't a lot of connection between cultures. And in many ways, we're more like fractured colors of the rainbow. So we haven't known that. In each different culture, they've thought they were the truth. They were the way, like many cultures will say something along the lines of, this is the way.
Yeah.
But really, we've always been existing in relationship to each other. So one of the primary gifts that we get from yoga is this fulfillment of something we've lacked. My personal experience was that I went through a transformation where I was chaotic, I was confused, I was overwhelmed, and this was medicine. And it took me years to appreciate this was medicine, because it's as if you have a rainbow without the colors blue and purple. You don't have a rainbow. You're out of whack. Now, on a more practical level, what yoga does is it integrates your mind, body, and spirit on purpose. They know that's what they're doing. So when you have a thought, it's resonating and it's affecting your body. But when you move your body, that resonates also and affects your thoughts. So yoga is in many ways the art of tuning these forces to each other with a recognition you can focus on physical movement and alignment and intentionally develop your ability to build resonance, build healthy resonance that will function as medicine for imbalanced thoughts and emotions. And so it's crucial to embrace that it's purely healthy on a physical level. A lot of people engage it mostly as if they're just getting a good exercise. But it has this added quality of aligning the way you work with energy. Even if you don't know that's what you're doing that. And when you work in a healthy way with energy, you're resonating in a way that calms your mind down. It puts imbalanced thoughts, wild, chaotic ideas into coherence. And that is a gift beyond measure in many ways. And it's also medicine for many people who are waking up. So it's not an accident that when people go through any level of spiritual awakening, this is golden. It's crucial medicine in a way that it's several missing colors of the rainbow. You need them.
Exactly. That's excellent. Thank you so much. That's probably the best explanation I've ever heard.
Oh.
That's excellent. Do you remember? Oh, I'm going to save that question.
Okay.
how were you introduced to yoga, and how did this blossom for you?
I was going through a time of real self-reflection. And I think in a way, I'm still wanting, self-congratulations for this, but I was doing really well. I was living in an up-and-coming, like, gentrifying neighborhood in New York City. I had a high-paying job. I'd gotten a new job that was higher paying than my last one. It had stock options. I was like, woo, and I was miserable. And so I had this extreme success on a certain level, and it just wasn't working. So I was in this, like, questioning my reality, what's going on, and it was starting to fall apart. I just couldn't make myself go to work. And I remember staying home. I just couldn't go to work. And I spontaneously felt convinced I needed to do wheel pose. I don't think I even identified it as yoga, but I just felt it. And then setting that aside, within a couple months, I had crashed. I hadn't been able to make a full choice. I ended up in a period where I couldn't sleep or eat for a week. And my life challenges were forcing me to question my reality in a way that it's a real trigger for spiritual awakening, like a straightforward, shift in your relationship to your major life path, divorces, career change, big moves. This can trigger spiritual awakening. It's a very interconnected phenomena. And so I was experiencing this tortured bad feelings and extraordinary, like, oh my gosh, reality is far more interesting than I thought, all at once. And I didn't know how to reconcile it. I crashed, and I ended up back in my hometown with my family, which was pretty embarrassing. I was 25, I felt it as a failure. And I was a wreck. I was breaking up with a woman. I didn't want to. I thought this was someone I was going to marry. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't hold it together. We were going on very different paths. And I didn't have the maturity to know how to make a clear decision, which can be a terrible inspiration for sort of mental pain and torture. So I'm a wreck. For several weeks, I'm just not functioning, sitting on the couch, staring at the wall. And my sister told me to go do yoga. And she put in a tape. She put in a yoga tape. And I could still just sort of come to life realizing that I could keep ruminating. I could keep just brewing and stewing, but at least I was doing something. Yeah. And that's what got me to stay with it. That I realized that the action of the practice was tempering my confusion. At first, I'd been going at the problems. I'd just been sitting there stewing on the problems, thinking about all the different potential ways I could make a decision or try to take a different action. Or I wrote poems. I wrote journal entries 50 pages long. When I did the yoga, nothing practical changed. It just calmed down. And that was new to me at the time, that the challenge wasn't going at the thoughts and emotions. It was doing something different. And so that alone was just a huge revelation. I didn't have a relationship or a language of spirituality, and that's not what got me. It was just a practical do this. And I think that's why yoga gets to people through the gym. It's like you don't need to sort of embark on a journey of reverence, but you may well find that if you stay with it.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I think it'll make a lot of sense for a lot of people watching too, and like people who are just starting to come into their spiritual awakening, their spiritual journey. Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Who was your first yoga teacher?
Well, I was sort of wanting to say, I'm like, oh, I should have said that tape was a woman named Patricia Walden. It was Living Arts yoga tapes, and she was a different kind of person than I knew existed. Like she was just holding this space, and it was like being introduced to a color that I didn't know was there, and it was blessedly new. It was a window out of the thoughts and confusions I was stuck in, and because I was so broken, I was so at a low, I think I set aside anything else. At the time, I was very athletic. I'd been lifting weights And so I probably would have refused to try yoga 4 months before. But when I had fallen apart and it was clear that this was making it better, I was able to set aside any preconceptions that it wasn't masculine enough or something like that and stick with it.
I love that. Who are your most influential yoga teachers?
I studied with a lot of different teachers, and I was, in retrospect, I'm grateful, although I don't necessarily encourage this. It's an extra level of work, because realistically, yoga is carrying energy. So you're not just learning a pose, you're not just learning a correction, you're tuning to the energy that you're learning from and with. And that's a powerful force. The Indians understand it very clearly, and Westerners do not. And I think that's part of why there's been a lot of turmoil as people go to India and come back and teach lessons from there. There are unique challenges to bridging the cultures, because when you're raised in an Indian way of being, as Sadhguru would say, they like their cosmic chaos. And here in America, it's not so clear. So I dove into the cosmic chaos, and I really studied with a bunch of different teachers. I also did a lot of tapes with Rodney Yee, who I really loved that, and he brought strength into it, and that kind of kept me going, because I was pretty strong. I was a young man, and I'd had worked out heavily, so I wanted the challenge. I wanted the physical challenge. I went into New York City. I went to a kind of chic yoga studio after a while. I don't remember their names, but I would, you could go at any time and it might be a different teacher. And that was great, although I think they probably should have told me to chill out. I was like trying to go to the advanced classes within 6 months, and I was overstraining, and they didn't tell me not to. Then I went to a man named Dharma Mitra, who's very well renowned. He had a studio in New York City as well. He's from India, and he's still around, I believe. He's in his 80s. And I practiced a lot on my own. I remember having a very profound experience where I could envision being taught by a Kung Fu teacher who I'd worked with before practicing yoga. He was a Kung Fu and Aikido master, and I had loved it. I had really loved it, but it had been making me very violent. Like, my mind had become violent. I remember going on the subway and telling my girlfriend, if someone attacks us, stand behind us. Stand behind me. I will defend you. And it's like, I hadn't been threatened at all in 4 years in New York City. Like, I was just thinking like an idiot, And so I was legitimately concerned that my relationship to Kung Fu was making me too violent. But once I left it, I remember I was using the lessons from Kung Fu to have a slightly different relationship to the yoga, and it was very helpful. And that was necessary, because he had taught in a way that had empowered me much more. And I was finding that the more traditional yoga teachers were very disempowering on a certain level. They were correcting me so much that I lost my ability to correct myself or make my own decisions. I carried a worry. Am I doing this right? And I would be looking around. Can you tell me if this is okay? And I found that to be very concerning. So when I felt that cropping up, I would practice in my yard, and I would practice for extended period of time in my yard. I went on from there. I studied with a woman who was the assistant to Kali Ray, who does a lot of work with mudras and developed her own style, a lot of flowing energy. I did a workshop in the style, and then I went and lived at her yoga center, a yoga retreat center where she taught. And at that center, a visiting yogi introduced forest yoga, which is I like the name immediately because I'm very nature-based. It's actually a woman named Anna Forrest. And I love the style. It was really cool. It was a great combination of grace and strength. And it was also simpler. There was something about it that reconciled this sense of hesitation. It felt more empowering. And within a couple of months, I was in LA, and she was doing a yoga training, and I did a yoga training with her, and that's where I did the teacher training that eventually empowered me to be a teacher with Anna Forrest. So those are the big ones, and I've been exposed to others. I never studied with John Friend, but I worked at a studio where some of his teachers worked as well, and I was very inspired by their styles. I really took on. I went to gosh, I don't even remember what it was called. It was a huge yoga retreat. There were a lot of big ones there, and I took classes with Michael Franti, who was playing music while they did a class. Sean Cord. It was beautiful. It was quite something. It was a lot of influences, and the thing about that is, overall, it's worth it to get many influences, and there's a little bit of a jockeying for position among yogis, and I guess I'll wrap this up. I could go on forever on the many different teachers. The funny way I like to think of it is, when I started yoga, I was also renovating a house, my family house, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just convinced I could figure it out. But every once in a while, I'd come across a problem I really couldn't handle. So I'd come against a more complex plumbing or electrical problem, and I'd call someone and I'd bring them in. And after like the third or fourth guy, I was like, wow, you guys all do the same thing. They'd come in, they'd go, oh, look at this. Do you see what this guy did? Now, he made a T shape here. He should have gone like this. This is terrible. I'm really glad this didn't become a bigger problem for you. Thankfully, I'm here to help you fix it. They all did that. And after a while, I'm like, you guys are, cut it out. You know?
Da, 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 da.
And then I found the yogis did it. And I was like, this sucks, you know, because I started yoga from a place where I was so broken down that I was really, I rebuilt my whole life from scratch. Like, this was a significant, because it was a spiritual awakening by every level that people understand now. But you all can look it up on YouTube. There was no YouTube then. Like, I had no external guidance. And so I was piecing myself together while I fought off the insinuation that I needed to be medicated on psychoactive drugs, that I might be schizophrenic. Like, I was facing some of the most terrifying threats to my psyche. And I was piecing together a new life from it. I accepted what worked and I rejected what didn't. I was like a no-nonsense space. So I would learn yin yoga. I would learn power yoga. I would learn very deeply traditional yoga with only Sanskrit words. I would learn gym, like, do it again, you can do it yoga. Like, I was exposed to all of it, and there was value in most of it. And I got really tired of the internal criticisms, because I'm like, these things fit together. You don't need to tell me that you're better than this guy. When I'm in a rejuvenative space, I need to be still. Don't tell me I have to get my heart rate up every time. And when I'm in a need for invigoration, don't tell me to stay still. I need to do reps now. I need to build my heart rate. I don't have enough heat to go deep yet. Like, there seemed to be a natural way that the different styles could fit together, and even did fit together. And I got tired of everybody championing their own way and criticizing the last person. It just, and in my experience, that's still out there. Although I would suggest that there's something really wonderful happening when it's taught online, because people have the ability to switch so easily and be exposed to so many different styles that it breaks down some of this superiority complex and like jockeying for position in a way that I think is very healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do know what you mean by that, and I find that humorous.
It remains hilarious, and I think it's important to sort of tear people's egos down a little bit.
Yeah, very ego dissolving. That's what I was thinking too. I'm like, wow, that would be a humbling experience. Now, this is going more into Wildflowerfire yoga. How was Wildflowerfire yoga developed?
So, really, out of the story I just held.
Yeah.
I would say the moment it started, I was in my teacher training with Anna Forrest, and I love the yoga, and I'm so grateful for it. You know, I think in retrospect, it was the perfect style to embrace. And I asked her, why did you start your own yoga style? And she gave me a good answer. I didn't expect it. I sort of held a bit of a chip on my shoulder, like she's being egoic to name it after herself.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked her answer. She said, I went to India. She studied with Joyce, who founded Ashtanga Yoga, and Iyengar, he's a godfather of yoga on so many different levels. Very different styles. Iyengar is very precise and corrective, very conscious of how the body moves and how you can learn to move this muscle and release this muscle. But it's a little like a visit to a mechanic's shop, and it does run the risk of sort of making you hesitant, like maybe I'm doing this wrong. And Joyce, Ashtanga was developed for young men who wanted to be set free. So he developed a lot of ways they could memorize patterns and engage them on their own, which is awesome. It's very liberating. But it does run the risk of channeling you into sort of a form of intensity that I ended up feeling was kind of out of tune with nature, to be honest. People could disagree, but I felt like too much of that was imbalanced for me. And she basically said that. She said she studied with them, and she ended up feeling like they were restricted in ways they didn't see. That she had perspective coming from our culture that they were being too controlling, and they were emphasizing things that were not necessary. So they were forcing people to kind of jump through 3 hoops just to move 1 step to the left. And once she explained it that way, a lot clicked into place. I'm like, oh man, that is so true. That there's a control factor that comes in when a teacher insists on you replicating the entire arc of their path. Do you really need to know all those things? Furthermore, when you're raised speaking one language and you learn something in that language, it plays a very different role than learning it from afar. Now, there's a real sort of yoga purist sense like, oh, you should only learn the Sanskrit words. And Anna Forrest gave me the confidence to say, look, we lose too much. When you're transplanting yourself into another culture and you can't just be present with the simplicity of how you relate to it, there's too much lost. We lose our initiative. We lose our ability to just be at peace with what we're doing and own it. And she did that. She said, I saw a clear way that I could make this a lot simpler. And I believe that it would be much better medicine for people if I could just give it to them without all these filters and barriers and essentially frills and bells and whistles. Just cut it all away and give it to them in a way they could use. Good, clear, deep medicine, let them have it. I loved that. That was just brilliant. And as soon as I left her training, I said, I think I have a better way to do this. And that was hard for me. I mean, it was immediate. I immediately said, I don't think I'm supposed to be like within this system. Mm-hmm. Not through lack of respect, just through I felt like I had a vision of how to do it differently. And it took me another 10 years to be able to assert it that way. Yoga was such medicine for me when I was so low that I'm very humble in relationship to it. And frankly, I started just before it was popular, in my opinion. And so I faced a lot of ridicule. Like I had boys in the neighborhood I lived in heckling me mercilessly, like terrifying experiences of them just brutalizing me for being gay, basically, for doing yoga. Like I had to go through the fire to own this stuff, and so I didn't have an ego about it. And it seemed to me a little outrageous to name my own style. And furthermore, I can't do as many trick poses as plenty of people. I certainly couldn't do as many deep bends and lifts and arm balances as Anna Forrest, the teacher I worked with. So it seemed a little preposterous to me to found my own style. Nonetheless, I found over time I was doing it my own way. And in about 10 years, I put that it all solidified all at once. And I developed the sequences that we're calling flowers. Flow, you are someone who flows. And the sequences just fell into place like a gift from Shiva. And he has assured me ever since that that's exactly what it was, that he gave it to me. And the reason it felt so important was my deep commitment was to design the yoga in a way that could liberate people to tune into themselves. I gained so much healing through accessing the trust in myself to follow my own intuition in a practice. And that was more liberating than anything that I copied.
Mm-hmm.
You could go through an incredible flow being in a room. Like, I will not knock it. You get 100 people in a room doing the same yoga, and there's a buzz it'll stay with you for years. I could still remember some of the moments, but something is lost. I'm not saying don't do it, just only do it sometimes. Because what can happen when you go completely into yourself is you find God. You find your own divine attunement, and it's unaffected by external buzz and external adrenaline, intensities, and just the vibe that a room could create, a shared vibe that a room could create. It's wonderful to melt into. It's wonderful to dissolve into, but it doesn't know you for who you are. So you need, in your practice, you must have the ability to find your own practice sometimes where you're going to stay. If you find a depth in a pose that you're juicing that perfect place, no one's going to tell you to move. No thought in your head is going to tell you you're going to move. No preconception about a practice or a structure or a routine is going to tell you have the self-empowerment to be your own teacher in that moment. And I wanted to give that to people as soon as it was healthy, as soon as it was reasonably possible. So the desire was to create these flows where you could have a whole sequence and you can ride it in a different way. If you're challenged in one way, you immediately know what the alternative is. If you're ready to challenge yourself, you immediately know what to take on. If you want to challenge yourself, but you're not ready to do that challenge, you know what steps you could take in that direction. And that's what the flowers are. They're these sequences through 12 sets designed around each chakra that have multiple different levels and multiple different styles. So if you feel like you need to move more today, do the movement. If you feel like you're ready to stay with a strong, intense pose, do it. If you're feeling like, I just don't have the patience for that, for this 5 minutes, then you know which stillness pose to use. And I geek out on it. I love how elegant it is. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful I was a vessel for it, because I was praying for this, but it was given to me to share.
You're teaching us to be our own gurus.
That's the goal.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Wow. There's so much that you've said there that I can really relate with as being somebody who has come into a little bit of study with you.
Well, a little bit. You've been doing this for almost 2 years.
Over 2 years now. Yeah. But I'm even though it's been 2 years, like I feel like I'm coming into a level of where I'm starting to broaden and understand a little bit more, where it's no longer like I still have my foundations, but now I'm starting to broaden. I'm starting to understand how the energy moves into the muscles, how the muscles connect from one to the other, and how it flows. You can start to feel the flow and feel the vibrations. So that's been very interesting learning. It's neat when you learn things that you never had. You had these preconceived notions before where you never realized that they even existed, right? And then you realize that they exist, and it's like, wow, oh my God, this is magic.
Well, that's the goal, and that ended up being what pushed me over the top to say, I really feel like I need to design this as a unique style that no other style I was exposed to could honor. The moment that happened for me, I was in the yoga training I did with Anna Forrest. It was in LA. It was a month-long training, 10 hours a day. Really, really wonderful. And I was having trauma come up. I was at a crucial transition, and I had some trauma just surging to the surface. In fact, that had inspired me to know that I had to do a training then. So I was doing the training as medicine for my trauma, and it was presented as yoga for trauma. This is ideal medicine for, you could do it to become a teacher, or you could do it just as a personal challenge to help you heal yourself. And they made that very explicit, and that's what pushed me over the edge to do it. So a weekend, it was louder. And I was aghast. I'm like, this is not working. Like, my trauma is worse than it was before. And I had I wanted it to fix it. I wanted the yoga to fix the trauma. And so I knew she has, I presume, really strong boundaries. And so she wouldn't hang out after class. And she was gracious about it. She's like, look, I stay here from 9 to 7 or whatever it was, or no, 6 to, it was a lot. It was a lot of the day. And when I'm done, I'm done. I'm not here to hang out with you. I'm not here to be your best friend, but I'm also not here to be your guru that's going to take away your agency. I'm giving you the best I got. You're paying me. That's the deal. I respected that. I was like, awesome. So I wrote her a letter. I'm like, honestly, I'm falling apart. I'm freaking out. I wrote her a letter explaining what I was going through. Nothing. I'm going in day after day, nothing. A week later, she says, out of nowhere, seemingly, Daniel, you've got some challenges happening, right? I was like, wrote you that letter a week ago. And she said, I'd like you to go to the center of the circle. And she did this occasionally. So there was like 35 people training. And I went to the center of the circle, and she asked someone else, another woman in the training, she said, okay, now you are going to help him into a forward bend. And she chose it on purpose medicinally. And my challenges were definitely in my second chakra and my lower back. And I couldn't do a proper forward bend. So I'm in the forward bend, and she encourages this woman. She's like, put your hand on his lower back. And I remember it was like a minute, and the woman goes, nothing's happening. And Anna Porras just said, stay with it. I cracked. Like, I can't even remember what happened. I started yelling. 3 women left the room. One of them came back later saying she could see colors everywhere. Like, I'd ripped open a vent in reality. It was really intense. And it was a childhood trauma, like screaming to the surface. And the resonance just affected everyone. And I don't even know how it happened, but I'm over on the side and I'm bawling. I'm like crying and crying and crying. And another woman's holding me. And this like LA model, like I never connected with her, but she was like classically gorgeous. And she's just screaming at Anna, I don't want to see that. I didn't come here to see that. It was intense, and it was like my worst fears, right? Like, don't share your feelings, they'll be too much. Well, I was a lot. And Anna reached over and she took my hand, and she held my hand, and she looked at the woman and she said, it's your job. Just changed my life. And I turned towards her, and I'm like, coming back together, and she just looks at me and she goes, that what you needed? And yeah. I just looked back at her and I said, yes. And she says, good. And it's ironic because she held space for that. And in so many ways, like it's 20 years later, I still honor her so deeply for it. Like, she was one of the greatest healers of my life. And in the same regard, it introduced me to the fact that wounds are stored energetically. Mm-hmm. And in order to engage wounds effectively, you have to appreciate that trapped resonance might be the cause of physical stuckness. So I wanted to not only design a yoga for trauma healing, because we were clearly being trained to hold space for such intensities, I wanted to design a yoga that was going to intentionally help us relate to this relationship between mind and spirit. So I didn't want to just have the poses available to access these things. And it felt crucial to educate people on this connection that our mind can hold a framework of reality that's inaccurate. And when we isolate traumas, which are outside our conscious awareness, we can learn to bridge that gap on purpose. We can learn to make connections that access stored resonance. That's the reason you can't open your hips. And so you could spend years trying to engage a pose and you won't make progress because the problem is not physical. The problem's energetic. And I wanted all three tools to be built into the system. I wanted the mind, the body, and the spirit to be intentionally built into the system. And classical yoga is, in America, is overemphasizing the physical. People don't, they learn it at the gym. They don't want to engage the spiritual levels. And like, that's not what I'm for. I'm for finding a way to bring the spirituality into a context that people can appreciate here. And I have found that too much was lost when you're telling people they've got to learn Hindi in order to do it. They've got to memorize all. It's just too many barriers all at once. I wanted to give it to people in our own language, in a simplified form that suits the more independent, leave me alone, I could do it by myself spirit that guided me and the people that I want to support and serve. So that pushed me over the edge, over a decade-long struggle internally with, am I really going to do this? Can I handle this? Is this, my ego talking that I should design my own style? It was a long thing. And even when I put the flowers together, at first I thought it was preposterous. The thing is, they came out in like a month. I got it all. They're virtually unchanged. I've added some potentials to like make it a little more difficult or to make some things more easy, just so there's several more options. But overall, very little has changed in the structures. But it took me a couple of years to come to terms with the fact that I was given this. That's a big deal. It's like, holy shit, and that alone is affirming. It's like, one, there's this deep reverence that a spiritual gift was given to me to share. And another, it completely takes out the ego issue. It's like, I didn't make it up. I'm not saying I'm anything. I can't do, I can't do a crow to handstand transition. I'd like to, but to me, those were the thresholds I needed to cross to think that I could found my own yoga style. Well, that's not what it's about. It's about the integration of the chakras, the integration of the energy dynamics that allow us to sit around and learn to understand life itself in a new way. And I'm grateful to be a vessel for it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. It brought up a lot for me when you were saying it. That's huge. That's like, even just when you think about the transition of and being able to get the mind to come into communication with your spirit and to be able to tap into traumas that you received as children, things that completely I don't know the word.
It's incredible, and the thing is, look, I haven't been to India, but I've studied with a lot of people who have, and I've studied with several Indian yogis, and the ongoing sense is that a lot of things are normal to them.
Yeah.
So we have this added challenge of, how do we create an environment that appreciates that this is even possible?
Yeah.
It's transcendent. I remember when I first learned to feel my heart. It was incredible. I'm like, holy shit, what's going on? It's incredible that this is possible.
Yeah.
And that when you learn to appreciate that so many of the regular dynamics of life, of thoughts, of habits, of choices, of traumas, of life decisions, all of these there's a whole world of presence spiritually underneath all that. And if you don't access it, it's like you're walking around looking at the ground all the time, never looking up. And you just bump into things.
We're Mario in 2D.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then when we start doing yoga, we become more Mario in 3D. Okay. Now, this is also in regards to Wildflowerfire yoga. How do you achieve balance within the practices of the standing flower, balancing flower, grounding flower, and breathing flower? How do you, I know that you're a master in this. You've been doing this for a very long time, but as a student, so how did you design this program to work for every student in a way that it can bring them into balance?
So the first and most important element of that is to empower people to recognize that you're the best judge of when you're in balance. Okay. It's that mental approach to your practice, and it's mental. to have the idea in your head, you have to be the one that knows your own limits. You can't rely on someone else to say start and go effectively. Now, people all over the world, yoga teachers everywhere you go, will say start and go. And what they're doing is they're all doing it in a different pattern. And the basic thing that's happening is people are just gravitating to who says start and go in a rhythm that works for them. I wanted to transcend that dynamic where rather than just creating a clear formula and waiting for the people who fit into this formula, we're saying, here's a structure, but you need to be the one who has the brake and the gas within this structure. And so we're going to give you the tools to say, if you want to put on the gas, here's how. If you want to put on the brake, here's how. But you make that choice. I was astonished by how well it worked. I remain astonished by how well it worked. Anna Forrest taught us this thing called tweaking, which I do my best to relay to people too, where you can end a practice and you can know if you're tweaking a little. Like there's just something in you that's just it's like it's bothering you. Certain tensions will stand out more if you do a good practice, but you do something wrong, or you address something, or you don't address something that needs attention. And that's tweaking. And it stands out more because the rest of your body's now relaxed. So this tension will just bug you for hours, right? You can just, and that became I became very conscious of it. And she emphasized that came through sequencing. So we had to be very conscious and intentional about the sequencing. And I was astonished to find that I don't think that's entirely true. I think it's about how you engage the poses. And so if you treat early poses as a warm-up, and if you treat the final poses as a cool down, you will engage them differently. At first, you're going to be intentionally trying to invigorate yourself. Don't linger. You haven't warmed up your body. There's no point in lingering. Just do some movement, get it going. Tune into yourself, then get your heartbeat up, and then you'll be able to move. And then at the end, you want to stop striving. You want to give yourself exactly what you feel like giving yourself. And so you could use many poses this way, but you want to engage it as okay, I'm going to be letting go now. Let's let myself unwind. Same pose, but don't strive. It's just a little bit different. You keep yourself within a letting go mindset. And I'm astonished. To me, like the crow pose near the end of a sequence, which is what happens if you do the grounding flower and you still have a lot of energy. So it's the third eye ends up being the last pose sequence before the heart, where you're cooling down, completely cooling down. But again and again and again, I find it's great. If I've got a little left in me, I want that last challenge. And then I'm like giving it all to the mat. I'm just letting go of everything. And if I don't have it in me, don't do it. Give myself permission. Just don't do it today. And so when you learn to think that way, you're the one that knows how to ride that arc, that wave through the entire practice. And that's a lot harder to do if you're built into a structure of do what the teacher tells you. Because even if the teacher says, do this, but if you don't like it, you can do this, you feel like a failure, like, come on, I could do it. So to have this different mindset where you're making a new choice again and again, you're always in a sort of reverent attitude to yourself. Today, what's going to fit? Today, what do I need? The gifts of this end up playing out throughout the rest of our lives, that we're intentionally engaging all of our decisions with this reverence for truly what's in tune with my spirit today. Yeah. A lot of people never ask that question, and our practice can put us in a position to do it in the rest of our lives. That's one of the good reasons we call this practice. Ideally, we're practicing healthy relationship to life itself in a way that makes us better at living.
I find that as a direct experience from doing Wildflowerfire yoga. I find that I do that every day.
Can you talk about your experience with it more?
Sure.
You've taken to this so wonderfully. You're practicing almost entirely on your own, and it's been working for years. So why? What works for you?
I really had to learn my boundaries. I had to learn to listen to myself. I've been learning to listen to my intuition. I ignored my intuition for years. I ignored my body for years. and I ignored my muscles and what they were telling me. And as I started doing this, you start to see things that you never imagined possible. The communication that your body gives you is unfathomable. It's my body will pull back from things that are not good for me.
Yes.
I will retract from things that don't feel good. And they're subtle. They're very, very subtle shifts. And as you become more conscious of your body, and as you become more conscious of just tuning into yourself every day, you have your foundation from your flower and from your practice. And then as I go through my day, different things speak to me in ways that they never did before. And it's made life very interesting. You're talking to somebody and all of a sudden you get this huge energy and coming down your crown, and it's like big waves and it feels amazing, and so at that moment you're having like a really great moment, a great conversation with this person, right? This, like, you're in tune in that moment. Whereas those are things that I never even touched on before. I didn't even realize it was possible to feel other people in that manner, and to be, like, I can feel a vibration and emotion from what people say. And sometimes it's not even the words, but I'll feel the emotion behind the words. And so then the reaction of my body as to whether or not my body kind of retracts or feels into it, that gives me an indication as to whether or not I want to engage, or if I want to disengage from whatever it is that's transpiring. It's become very unique. It's almost like a science.
Well, and many people will refer to yoga as a science on purpose. Most human beings need it. We need to be living in a context very much like what you describe, where we are so committed to our subtle awareness of vibration that we can recognize enough with a subtle imprint to make a different decision. Mm-hmm. To follow our gut instincts the moment they start to tell us something that's going wrong. Because honestly, if you wait for it to build much further than that, you have a different range of problems. So what you're describing is a form of liberation that I think should be our birthright. We need to live with this reverence and respect for the spiritual, physical intercommunication. And to get that, I really think we have to remove as many barriers and filters from the way as possible, and respect the fact that I think a ton of people, certainly in North America, in Europe as well, for my exposure, a ton of people are waking up. They're like a car that's already driving and they don't know how to use the steering wheel, the brake, or the gas. Like,
it's shocking. It's truly shocking when you go through an awakening. The communication that I had with spirit at that point in time, one of the first communication words that I got was asanas. And I didn't know what an asana was. I didn't know. I was like, what's an asana? And so then I start Googling what an asana was, and it starts bringing up yoga. And at that point in time, I didn't understand yoga. So I was meditating, mm-hmm. For health reasons. And it just and as it blossomed, and as I found doing yoga with Wildflowerfire, it's been developing something in me that I didn't realize existed. And it changes you in a really beautiful way. And it's subtle. It takes time. So it's not, for anybody listening who's new, it's not something where you're going to go and do for a month and it does take time. I've seen where people have big transformations, but I personally think that, slow and steady is a good motto.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
That's been another ironic discovery in a way. And I think this is happening on its own, really. I think people are organically realizing that a vast number of folk will do a 20-minute practice who can't do an hour. And so I think there's something built into at least the Western lifestyle that suggests be at peace with 20 minutes. If you can get a good 20-minute practice in, it'll change the foundation of your life.
It will.
Slow and steady. And, you know, when I started yoga, I did do hours of yoga all week long. I would do 3 practices a day sometimes. There's a limit to how many people can do that. I had set aside my entire life to do this. And I think it's borderline abusive to tell everybody they have to be like that, because they can't. It's just not possible. So to really build a respect for the fact that if you get 20 minutes in, you've changed your day. You have absolutely changed your day. And you might even make it through the next day. Okay. That's why I tell people, like, make yourself do 20 minutes every other day. Make that happen. Even if you're resistant, you could do it. You know, you could carve out 20 minutes. Even a new parent or someone with a 10-hour workday, you could carve out 20 minutes. Eat less. Do it, you know. But more than that, I would not encourage you to force, because you should live with a recognition for how much of a difference that 20 minutes gives you. If you're going to do more, you need to want more.
Yeah. I personally found, because when I was first starting, one of the things that I found, and I believe a lot of people who are first starting yoga experience this too, is resistance to movement. You know, even as a child, like as a very active child, and I was always told, sit down, don't move, you know? And so you have to learn to kind of break out of that and get back into movements. Okay. You know, and even around other people, your family and stuff like that, you know, it takes a little bit for them to get used to, but once they get used to it, you start living in a different way, in a much healthier way, I find. Yeah, that's excellent.
Well, I think, you know, that again speaks to why I feel it's so important we more intentionally engage this as a mind-body spirit integration. This is not just one alternative among many to calisthenics and kung fu. The intentional integration of the spiritual awareness can lead people to respect that your resistance to moving your body is not physical. Your body wants to move. Your body is sick of being told not to move. Your body is sick of being told to sit still. That is true for almost everyone I know. The body wants to move. The resistance is a mental force field.
Yeah.
Spirit is not all good. Spirit is just spirit. Mental patterns will generate spiritual energy. And a mental pattern of lethargy or stuck routines or working at a desk all day will generate a rigid spirit. And that rigid spirit functions as a sort of force field saying, no, I can't move now. No, I can't move now. No, I can't move now. And worse than that, you will encounter them in other people. So if you start moving, you just spoke to this. If you start moving around people who aren't moving, you will feel them jerking away from you. You will feel them clench.
Yeah.
And it's downright eerie, right?
And they will react. They absolutely will react. The people around you will react to, and you just get to a point where you start to embrace that, and you recognize you do it in a very respectful way, you know. But I found that the biggest thing that helped me conquer that was the 20-minute workout. Was the 20-minute yoga.
You got it. And you know, it works, right? Like, because it's not so much that the mind will rigidly be able to rebel against it. In fact, I think there's a legitimacy to it. When you're used to not moving, I don't think it's good to force yourself into an hour on a regular basis. You'll backlash.
You're not conditioned.
You aren't. But 20 minutes, you can do it. You know, like, you can do it, you know? And I think it's a short enough time frame that you're essentially going to give half an hour of your day to this. There's like a transition at the end and the beginning. And we really do heavily emphasize a good 5 minutes of sitting. So I don't want to overdo it. And that's going to be hard for some people to digest, but you want to sit for 5 minutes, at least 3. And there's scientific research that demonstrates that stress patterns will dissolve during exercise, but people can go right back into them afterwards. But if you do 5 minutes of intentional breathing, you take that practice into your body. And this is yet another reason why it's so important to understand the mind, spirit, body integration. That you've done the work but you need to kind of weave them together and give your mind a different sense of center that you generate in the practice. You're practicing in a way that generates a different vibrational pattern. And you're speaking to this, and I'm so glad to have you be someone I'm talking to share it, because people have to do what you're doing, which is you're letting your life change. You're becoming aware of subtle instincts. You're becoming conscious that we're picking up on other people's emotions, that we're feeling all sorts of stuff that has always been there. We've just been blithely staying in our head. And we think we're unaware of it, but we're definitely affected by other people's emotional patterns. People are just all entangled in their families and workplaces. They're just wrapped up in each other. And to stick with this, you have to keep going and you wake up. You literally wake up to see all these patterns around you that a good, healthy integration practice will give you. A good yoga practice of most styles will start to wake up this awareness. And you have to learn how to cope with it. You have to learn how to deal with the fact that you become this entirely different person who's functioning. You're setting fire to patterns around you, whether you like it or not. You have to come to terms with that, right?
Yep. Like for me, some of the first things that I did was, quit smoking, started eating healthier. I suddenly became a vegan. Not that being a vegan makes you anything. It just, these were outside changes that people could see physically that kind of shook them up a little from, watching me change. And now they're used to it. They had to see that progression and be with it. But what it does is that it brings attention to the patterns, the ingrained patterns that they have.
Exactly.
So I reflect back, or we reflect back on them, and then they can see their own patterns, and that's uncomfortable.
And so you have to, it's like multiple levels of learning that you have to go through to be able to psychologically cope with the fact that you're playing this role in people's lives now. And it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
People can't afford certain kinds of insecurity anymore. Like, oh, no, that's not me. I couldn't possibly be influencing the room. No, you have to own it, because it is happening. And thus, I believe it's crucial that a yogic system teach people enough about what else is happening, not just the physical relationship, but the psychological, mental framework shifting in such a way that you could come to terms with the fact, I'm changing people. I am reflecting their stuff back on them. When you break through the boundary that has held repression down, you are resonating in such a way that fractures theirs, that starts to dissolve their boundary as well. And on some level, you have to be able to at least cope with it, if not be present for them when and if they're ready to face that honestly.
Exactly. And I find one of the biggest challenges for me when I was going through my awakening, I was very grateful to find you and find your practice, my practice. I find that that particular challenge and trying to be aware of it and not push what, because you start seeing so much so fast, right? And as you start seeing all these interconnections and all that, you see addictions, you see even like I'll see patterns of the way that people speak to themselves, safe thoughts. You start seeing many different patterns, right? And so you don't want to make them aware of that. I learned that you can't. Because as soon as you start making them aware, they might not be ready to hear that. Just because I can see it doesn't mean, because we went for years without seeing it in ourselves, right? So that I find that teaching in itself, that was something that you've been really teaching me with the work that you've been doing here. And that was huge for me. That was very huge.
I'm so glad you can say it, because that is what eventually pushed me over the edge to the point where Angie is part of our first round of teacher training. And the teacher training has finally emerged as not just yoga classes teacher training, but one-on-one practitioner training as well. And I've wrestled with this for 10 years, literally, thinking about doing two separate systems. But the reality is they go together. So as you are describing intimately, you need to develop the skills about how to interpret what you're seeing in other people and how to respond to that interpretation. Because not only do you begin to wake up and see all these patterns all around you, but you need the skills to know how to navigate that. When to touch it, when not to, how to hold space when they're ready, how to come to terms with it's an odd and unique form of loneliness.
Yes.
That you see things all around you that you can't even have a conversation with folks about, sometimes for years. In my experience, I see maladaptive, confused coping mechanisms all around me, and I have to go years without being able to speak to them. And at this point, there have been enough examples for me of people coming through after extended periods of time, me knowing something was there, and I just have to learn to pray, have to learn to stay centered and hold space and be like, when you're ready, I'm here. And they do. They'll come. And it's like they knew what you were doing. And there's this, Daniel, I need to talk to you about this. I've been realizing something.
And they may have even been one of your biggest critics while you were going through it.
Oh, absolutely.
I find very amazing.
Absolutely. And that alone these are all dynamics that I just don't believe you can't stay with the health you generate in your practice unless you also learn to cope with these patterns as well.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. It's like, and then the medicine that you receive ends up, it just automatically disperses into your family, into the people, everyone you connect with, everyone who's around you.
And honestly, it's fluid dynamics a little bit. Like, for the longest time, I sort of engaged an archetype of being spiritual as like, I'm above money. So I went 10 years very poor. I had very little, but I gauged it from a level of nobility. I thought of myself like a sadhu. A sadhu is a wandering yogi in India, and some of them are extraordinarily extreme, but the base level is that you're going to live simple to the earth. You accept gifts from other people when they're given. You're not begging. You're an ascetic. You live outside. You sleep with the stars. You're free. They often engage with cannabis. It keeps them tuned in this way. It's a big part of Shiva is the god of cannabis.
Oh,
and
I didn't know that.
There's a real relationship there, and it can tune you into the patterns of how to live in this sort of cherishing, tuning into a tree for 2 hours and things like this. I lived like that, so I didn't think of. I don't know why I used the word poor. I didn't think of it that way. I thought it was incredible that I was living this way, right? But it was not the best mode to be a teacher, and sadhus are not teachers. So as I felt the calling to be a teacher, I really returned to the lessons I got from Anna Forrest, who charges a lot of money. So I learned my teacher training from someone who charged quite a bit. She was at the more expensive end of the trainings at the time. And I ended up appreciating it. There's a spiritual money, so to speak. Like I know it doesn't feel great to think about it this way, but once you're well on a certain level, you could spend all your wellness on one person who's not ready to heal, and that'll just be like a leaky bucket. You'll pour your positive energy to them and it'll run right out, and you don't have any time left to serve anyone else. So developing a relationship where you're very present and you can engage someone with exactly what they're ready for is like wise investing. Now, as it so happens, it seems to me that it's what's best for other people as well. So what we're talking about is I love the language you were using. Your mental safe spaces, your coping mechanisms, your bad habits, your addictions. I see it all. But what can I really do with you that's going to be healthy? When you find what's right, it's right for both people. You as a practitioner or a teacher, and them as someone who's maybe only ready for this much. When you only share this much and you only touch them in the way they're ready, they don't feel threatened, and you don't have to deal with their backlash. You don't have to deal with their judgment, and you're teaching it with reverence. It's a sacred role to be able to see someone else's problems when they can't honor them themselves. It's a sacred vision that develops out of taking care of yourself this way, and it's crucial to be reverent and humble, to be like, ooh, I don't want to poke them the wrong way. It could spin them out, and I've learned the hard way on many occasions. And It's painful. It's painful to watch.
It is. Yeah, it is. I find that in one way I really honor it, because it's almost, there's a journey to kind of seeing it, and I really honor it, because when somebody is starting to wake up to even just one of the patterns, you see it, you see that wake up, right? And just seeing the little wake up, that's exciting.
And there's a real tolerance level. Like, it is not better to do an hour of yoga than 20 minutes.
That's right.
For some people, it might be right to do 20 minutes, and doing more will be counterproductive.
Exactly.
And to stay with this analogy for one moment longer, you can strive to do a whole sequence of poses, but if you're striving with a certain forcefulness, you will literally generate a kind of tension that wasn't there before. That defeats the purpose. You haven't accomplished anything. It's a misapplication of American gym
forcing.
thinking.
Forcing.
And yoga is explicitly there to find efficiency, to find the most graceful ways to develop our power. We're trying to be powerful. We just don't want to waste energy in the process, because you're not just wasting energy, you're generating tension that will stay with you. So you've defeated the purpose. You've defeated your initial intentions grandly if you force too much. So 20 minutes might be much better than an hour until you're ready. In the same way, when people are engaging with lifelong or multi-decade long bad habits, I love this, mental safe spaces that they're relying on to avoid their pain, coping mechanisms to avoid innate trauma, addictions to do the same. They're dealing with these forces for decades. How much can they handle today?
Yeah.
Like, are they in the right mood? Is the astrology correct? Is the weather okay? What are they really ready to engage? If you dump it on them, they're just going to say, fuck you. And they're going to be that much less likely to listen when another opportunity arises where they might have been ready. So it's a real sacred space.
Yeah. That's what I've been really discovering. And like before I started yoga, I didn't understand that. I didn't understand the sacredness in witnessing someone else.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've been really, really learning right now.
A lot of my unique focus in yoga and as an energy worker, which are really united roles, it comes from my vision. Now, my vision is very poor, and my corrective lenses do not bring it to anything like what you see or what people think of as normal. But I see energy. I don't see incredibly intricate patterns, but I see colors around the area of chakras. I see the aura in general, and I also get quite a range of visions. At a certain point, I watched a documentary. It's an IMAX movie about speed and size. I wish I remembered what it's called, but it's incredible. And it shows all these things of really fast, really slow, and ranges of color. So it shows infrared and ultraviolet ranges of, it gives us a way to see forces that we don't normally see. Oh my God, this is what I see. I see 3 octaves of color badly. So I'm seeing infrared patterns in people's face, and I'm seeing ultraviolet patterns, which is a frequency range in which I believe the chakras emit that I can see in. So I'm seeing this broader range of existence, but it's all a little fuzzy. But what I see, oh my God, like I could watch people have a conversation and they leave the conversation on the same vibe. I can watch 2 people independently and know they just had a deep, intimate conversation, even if I didn't see them standing together. The way in which we change energetically is it's ubiquitous. It's all over our lives. It's happening constantly. And when you see the patterns of it, you gain access to this incredible depth of how to make choices. And the funny number one thing is you learn how to step around stuff. like I just saw fangs on her. She is not in the right mood to talk. Like, and I do. You can see these forces in people, and you have to learn how to treat it as normal, because it is, honestly, it's devastating to be a part of. Most people, I'd say, have some exposure to this, but when they're drunk or when they're in a terrible breakup, you get these windows into the fracturing of reality, and you just get me back to normal. Just get me back to normal. This is my normal. I see this stuff all the time, and the way I like to assert it to people again and again and again, because this is just a truth across the board. If you want the best, you gotta get the worst too.
Yes.
What people typically do, I would say, in a normal life, in all the communities I've seen, is they sacrifice their best in order to get rid of their worst. It's a terrible dynamic, and I feel like I haven't been talking about it enough, to be honest with you. People sacrifice their best in order to get rid of their worst. If you want your best, you have to accept the worst. And so I walk through life seeing awful things in people all the time, and I treat it as normal. It's just like, of course, because I also see incredible beauty. I also have extraordinarily divine moments. I would say, more than anyone I'm around, I am a stand for folks. People will come to me with their dreams. People will come to me with their most heartfelt hopes. People will come to me with their deepest trust and faith. They're afraid of it. They may run from it, but they also tell me their biggest fears. And to be at peace with that is to learn that they're not equal. Many of us have lived lives in which it feels equal. The worst and the best are kind of roughly equivalent. They're not. The best is much stronger. The deepest love is much stronger, but you must be willing to face all the most difficult forces in order to stay with it.
That makes sense. That was actually a concept that I had difficulty learning with coming into yoga, because I had to really put down some of my limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
And I found that very challenging. It took some time to work through that, and there's still some times where I'm working through that. What made that possible?
Working through the limiting beliefs. I think there's so much. There's so much that contributed to the changes that to help me be where I am now. The doing my yoga practice was huge. Seeing a lot of what we were talking about, seeing people's cycles, the safe thoughts, even safe actions. Like I'll see, like when I'm talking to somebody, it's like you said, so you see color, but I'll see the body language. I'll see the way that their muscles are moving in their body. Do I feel flow? Like right now I'm feeling flow. Do I feel tension? So those things help me kind of come in. There's so much to it. It's been a very deep process of seeing things every day and experience, like I experience and see things every day that brings me deeper into my practice. And I don't know if that will make sense. And it's very sacred. And I've had to learn that sacredness, not just for myself, but for others, and figuring out how to honor myself, even when I don't like I don't like the thoughts that I'm feeling. I don't like what I might be thinking. Being able to hold space for myself, and being able to like sit in center and be able to just let them be, just let them all be. And just come to a place of quiet. That has been that I still work hard to do that.
Yeah.
And it's a continuous practice. But it's the most beautiful exchange I've ever encountered in my life is with my own spirit, if that makes sense.
And what you just articulated about being able to be present with, forgive me if I'm misquoting you, but the range of your feelings, things that folks often completely judge themselves for, things that are easy to feel ashamed of or guilty about, or just plain, that's not me. And yet to be able to say, well, here it is. To me, that's a wonderful answer to the question I was asserting to you. How do you transcend your limitations? And in so many ways, I think we make our limitations unwittingly by rejecting aspects of ourselves. And once you've rejected something in yourself, it doesn't go away. That's the gift of the spirit, the mind-spirit connection. You can mentally say that's not me. Spirit's brutally honest. Spirit, it doesn't go anywhere. Like,
Yes.
it doesn't go away. It's right there. And so when you know how to have any relationship, and I think it's important how you said, you can pick up on things through body language, through the rhythm of how someone's moving when they talk to you. There are so many ways into accessing these forces that they don't go anywhere. We try to stay in a mental awareness. I think people mistake the center of our language. It's a choice that we think with words.
Mm-hmm.
Plenty of beings don't think with words. Plenty of beings have all entirely different forms of language. Just people who use sign language are obviously thinking in a different way, but that's just a little window. Yeah. So we try to restrict ourselves within language and concepts that work with words. But when you know how to give credence to the rhythm of a body movement, to the resonance, however you pick it up, you lose the ability to think that you are not your full self. You are what you are. It's like, people who, in the 80s, I grew up, they taught us to fear Russians in the Cold War, which is a whole other story. I think that had an effect. So we would go around our lives talking about Red Dawn, this movie about boys beating the Russians and stupid shit like that. We would think about it. That wasn't the Russians, that was us. That was our negative energy. When people when people who live in a racist community are constantly thinking about these other people of this other color who they don't like, and every time they use, every time their windows don't work, they go, oh God, this must have been made by some blankety blank. Like, that's not the other person. That's their negative energy.
Exactly.
And from a spiritual perspective, brutally honest, it's obvious it's your energy. It's right there, but in a mental mind, in a mind that's framed with thoughts that exist in words and concepts, we have this ability to lie to ourselves that, from some frame of reference, it's absurd that it's possible to lie to yourself and to think that you are not what you are.
Yeah.
I think that's why this spirit body connection is the medicine for the unhealthy mind. When you work with everything you feel, whether it's a physical resonance or a spiritual resonance, and you're committed to working with it, you start to dissolve the idea that anything is not you. Whatever you're dealing with is you. And you have the tools to deal with it. And you have the empowerment to move through it. And that's just so liberating. It's just
that's what I love. That's what I love. That's what I feel like. That's what I feel like Wildflowerfire teaches. It teaches you to be your own guru. It teaches you how to feel everything, and then gives you the tools to be able to deal with it, whether that's childhood trauma, whether that's patterning, whether it's addictions, whether it really doesn't matter. You can transcend your whole life using this method, And one other thing I did want to touch on too, which
can you not change the subject yet though? Or is it the same?
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry at all. It's just, you brought up something that I think is important to know, because my experience with deep gurus is they will give you a lot of reasons why you need to keep coming back to them. Mm-hmm. And they don't know how to acknowledge their own investment in that dynamic. I went to live with a guru of sorts, and for 6 months I lived at his community, and I had a dream. He had one guy who was like his right-hand protege, and I had a dream that this guy was driving his SUV over a bridge to be with the guru guy, and the guru guy was sending him back across the bridge, and then he was driving across the bridge, and the guru guy was sending him back across the bridge, and he was driving across the bridge, and I got it. I'm like, he knows how to do it. He knows how to get into his divine self, but this dude's sitting there saying, no, you're not ready. But from this perspective, like, We already did it. You know? But I'm like, that's not what I want to do. And the irony is I was committed to this before the internet seemed like such an amazing tool. I mean, the internet was starting to exist, but it wasn't obvious. YouTube wasn't taking off. Now you got to teach this way because I'm not with you. You can't come check in on everything. You know, we've got a lot of tools to communicate, but you have to be more empowered on your own. So the excuse is to say, I have to be sort of your go-between with God. No way. And I think it's crucial to just, let's begin with the presumption that I respect you as your own guru. By the way, I've been doing this for a while. Maybe I can help you make it work. Like, that's what I'm trying to do.
I've been doing it for 30 years. I can help a little.
Yeah, and I'm trying to come with that respect for you, and it's more difficult in some sense. Like I deal with some confusing people, and people argue with me a little more than some of my teachers would have let them. At the same time, it feels so good to know that I'm just saying, look, this is medicine for what people are already going through. A lot of people are going through a spiritual awakening, which I would suggest is the realization of your divinity. Spiritual awakening is inspired by that first spark of, oh my God, I am divine.
Yeah.
It changes everything. It reframes everything. I'm not going to stand in between you, convince you to think I'm the divine that's making you divine. You already know you're divine. I'm here to help you manage that. And Angie is here to help you manage that because Angie's going through the training so you can do it too. Oh,
I found it was amazing when you start to see, I had a period where I was seeing that negative things that had happened in my life were actually designed by spirit to spark different things that made me go in different directions, or would I would see something that we would think of as negative.
yeah.
And then when I would realize that really that person's higher self, that person's spirit, they were all integrated and it all works together. And once you start realizing that everything works together, it's like a chain event. Like, what are those called?
Not the domino.
Is it dominoes where you push
You knock one and
all tip? It's almost like dominoes, like an interconnected web of dominoes. And we're all like reflecting and we're all connected in that same way. And once you start realizing, okay, well, this is pushing from over here. Okay, I don't like that. But just because we don't like something doesn't necessarily make that negative. That's just how we're framing it. Right?
You got it. You got it.
Yeah. And then it becomes all in you have the ability and the choice to reframe what's coming into your field. Right. And so some things are very unpleasant, but if you start looking at perhaps you have an illness, or perhaps those things are bringing attention, something in your life that you're not paying attention to.
And this is the threshold that I think we're looking at a couple decades of confusion in culture about it, because I find it is so hard for people to cross this. The implication that folks have responsibility for their suffering is very threatening to some people. And this is the first reason I discourage anyone who's learning, anyone who's awakening spiritually, I discourage you from just running in and telling people what you see. Because if you notice that they have internalized hatred or internalized, misery on any level, if you poke at it, it's going to be flung at you. So the first level is self-preservation, but the second level is they simply don't know how to integrate it yet. And it remains very sad because there's this implication like people will take it personally, like, you're telling me I'm doing something wrong? And it's like, no, I'm telling you there's a way to liberate yourself from this suffering.
Yeah.
But there's an art to how to tell someone that, which often involves silence.
Yeah. Or waiting till they're ready. And some people are never ready to transcend things.
And this is the next thing, is not in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Now, in a yogic culture, it's normal to be able to say that, and it's crucial to be able to think that way, because once you start recognizing karmic patterns, and that's essentially what's happening, all these things that you've woken up to see are what we can know as karmic patterns. Now, karma is the presence of the past in spiritual form. So it's an ability to say, what has happened is still here. I can see it. It's right there. You can see it in the manner that people move, in the intonations they make when they talk about certain subjects. There are many hints that help us tune in to the presence of the past.
Mhm.
But as you just said, it's how we frame it that our power rests in. We can change the past, because people have a false sense that their understanding of the past is objective. It's almost never objective. Now, on a certain base level, they've done studies that show our memories are terrible. Like, people adamantly, there's a name for this kind of study because it's so extreme, where folks will sign up, and the organizers running the study will wait for a major world event, and they got one of the best at 9/11 in the United States. So they had 1,000 people ready. Right after 9/11, like a week later, they interviewed everyone, and they said, tell us where you were when you first heard what happened, and tell us about your feelings. And they write it down, and they disappear. 10 years later, they tune in again, and they say, so tell us where you were on 9/11 and tell us what you felt. Absurd difference. One woman's testimony had been like, I was in my garage, I was starting my car, I was going to go to work, I decided I'd stay at home, my husband and I had dinner. 10 years later, I was with my sister, we were at the restaurant. Like, nothing to do with what had happened.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying how poor our memories are in this regard. So this is the first reason to basically, it's not that I want everyone to doubt themselves. It's the reverse. It's, we have so much influence over our past. Don't respect your thoughts about the past too much.
Yeah.
We tell ourselves stories. We can change those stories.
Yes. Yes. I understand what you mean by that. Very much.
And what you're saying, like, pardon me if I prod you to develop the language of it, like, to be able to reframe the past and rewrite stories of victimization, of blame, of resentment, anything that would have us essentially generating negative energies within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
This is what Eastern traditions are often much better at. And I found this more in more Chinese systems, in relation to my Kung Fu teacher, a Buddhist therapist that I worked with extensively. They were very good at teaching along the lines of hatred is like holding a hot coal and thinking that it'll burn someone else. The majority of the time we spend resenting other people hurts us.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't hurt them.
Well, they're off living their life. You're sitting there with the coal, thinking of all these negative thoughts. You're engulfed in that negativity. You're putting all your energy into that.
Exactly.
And then if you think about it in that context, it doesn't make sense. You put down the coal.
Exactly. And this is where it could circle back into a practice. And this is where I'm adamant, my whole plumber analogy, like, this is where I feel it is utterly crucial that we have a practice that gives us this range of exposure, range of possibility every time we get down on the mat, from being extraordinarily still to being extremely assertive with reps that exhaust us and make us sweat. We need a wide range of things because we need to be able to match stuck emotions and thoughts that are in our psyche. If you've been resenting someone for 10 years because of how they treated you in a relationship, you have to match that part of yourself that resents them and be stronger than it. One of the best ways I know how to do this, by the way, is low lunges and then work on lifting the knee. Have you worked on lifting the knee at all in a low lunge, Angie?
Yes.
All right.
I have.
So when next time you feel any level of resentment, this is the medicine for it. Okay. You work on lifting the knee and breathing as long as you can. And you just try to build an intensity that resonates with that hatred And then sort of, it's like you're keeping your own hatred company and saying, cut it out. Wouldn't you rather be strong? Beautiful feeling.
It's like a neutralizing.
Absolutely. And you have to. You can't just say no to intense feelings. It doesn't really work. You'll be wrestling with it. What we call zeroing in Wildflowerfire. If you just take a negative emotion and do this, at best you're going to zero it. But it takes a lot of energy. In order to rechannel it, you kind of have to ride with it for a while. Let it be wild and be with it in a way that can help it flow. So you're teaching your stray part self, you're teaching your stray resentments and confusions to participate in a conscious practice. And that translates into having that energy available to participate in a better life.
I love that analogy. That makes so much sense for me. That actually, I completely relate back to feeling the resistance to movement and doing my practice every day. Because at first that was very big emotions and it was really erratic and didn't necessarily even make sense to me. And on a mental level, like my mind couldn't comprehend what I was feeling and why I was even feeling resistance to it. And then as I came into the challenge every day of coming in, okay, let's do 20 minutes, and if you can't do it, sit down, that's okay. Let's do some breathing. And then after maybe a couple hours, let's do 20 minutes.
Awesome.
And then, because you got to come back to it, you want to circle back to it, right? And then, yes. But once you've done that 20 minutes, huge pat on the back. That feels awesome.
Absolutely.
And then you have just interrupted that pattern. Exactly. And that's huge. And you do that for 3 weeks, for 21 days, and then you're creating new, more positive patterns in your life. And I find that just that practice alone, you can expand into every area of your life, whether it's quitting smoking or quitting drinking or quitting, removing negative habits versus bringing and replacing them and bringing in more positive habits.
Absolutely. Physical addictions, sex, smoking, eating, drinking, any of them really. Now, there's uniqueness to all of them, but I find the most common factor is that something that we're experiencing in our body is calling for our attention, and our mind has framed it in a negative way. So it's important to add that caveat where it isn't necessarily a negative feeling, but we've framed it in a way that we're trying to avoid it. We're trying to not feel it.
Yeah.
So the power of a physical action is that it's immediate. It has this tangible, our entire mind knows we did it, and then we've changed our chemistry in a way that does have an effect. So it seems to give us power in relation to the disempowered feeling of an emotion that's beyond our grasp, that we don't want to feel. That's how people get addicted. And Gabor Mate does a lot of great work on this. I couldn't encourage people enough to explore him more. He said he's a doctor who did a lot of work with trauma and addiction. He said he never met anyone with an addiction who didn't carry trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Like people, the problem is not the addiction. The problem is the trauma beneath the addiction.
Yeah.
And when we don't have the tools to be present with our traumatic feelings, we don't have an alternative. And if you have an alternative to some part of your psyche, the addiction is actually medicine.
Yes.
It's an attempt to self-medicate.
Yep. Like I'll find there's certain triggers. I'll feel the trigger, and then I would go immediately to the cupboard and eat something.
There you go.
And as soon as I started noticing that pattern, then it became easier to try and isolate it, to try to start breaking that pattern.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. But the first part is just being aware and even seeing that you're doing it.
But you can't just say no. I think that's what's so bad about much of the modern response to addiction is it's focused around will and the discipline to say no. That's at best going to zero it.
Yeah.
So you might effectively do it, but it comes at a great cost, a lot of energy. Now you might need to engage it this way, but you need somewhere. This is not a resting place. There's no rest in this. It's going to keep happening underneath the surface. It might be more chill than it was before, but it takes a lot. So having an alternate, so you're saying, I'm noticing this urge. First of all, stop the judgment. as you put, let's just watch it. Okay, I'm having the urge to do this. Start to look for what else is happening that's beyond your consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I can almost promise you there's some negative feeling underneath the surface that you're avoiding.
Yep.
So if the mat becomes a safe place to face your negative feelings, where you're allowed to scream and you're allowed to cry and you're allowed to feel confused, wow, that alone is progress. And that's why I think it's so crucial we not be too addicted to any particular yogic style, yin or power or whatever, and get out of that and just be, you're going to that mat and we're giving you these tools. You can stay still, you can move hard, you can move easy, you can move wavy,
a different type of medicine. Just exactly. Like if you were taking plant medicine, you would give one plant for one specific symptom or one specific problem. And then you would change the medicine based on whatever's coming up at that time.
Exactly.
One of the things that I find very interesting that I haven't seen among other yogic practices that you practice, now this might just be my limited vision, my limited experience, but is your heartstorming. Doing Heartstorming. And this was a practice for me personally that I had a hard time embracing and sometimes still do, because it's a very intimate practice. Did you want to talk about it? Did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it should be terrifying. This is my attempt to, the heart, the physical organ, is pumping blood to every cell in the body. And it's helpful to have a basic understanding of how our bodies work. It's bringing blood with oxygen, basic nutrient, to every cell. So literally all our cells need to breathe, and the blood is what brings it there. And it's bringing white blood cells that will fight off any disease. And it's bringing the ability to heal anything that's cut or wounded. So that's the base level response the body has to fix things. This is the heart chakra as well. It's not an accident that they're working together in a sense. The heart chakra is in relationship to every cell in our body. So when we have been living in negative patterns for any length of time, the heart is the first place to go. Because whatever you get to resonate in your heart will be carried everywhere. Mm-hmm. That's why it's the best home base. Heartstorming is on a certain level very simple, and on another extremely difficult and terrifying. It's the idea that you're going to feel your heart chakra. Now, until you learn how to feel your heart chakra, Wildflowerfire is designed to get you there. And that could be a lot of work and take years, but it is a crucial, pivotal goal to learn to feel your heart. Once you can feel your heart, the goal is to stay. So what we do in a heartstorm is you can express anything, non-linear, any form, up, down, emotionally, boring, doesn't matter. You just have to keep feeling your heart. The heart does not care about logical order. The heart does not really understand time. So it's easy to bounce between peaks in your life in a heartstorm, and it's crucial. So in a heartstorm, you're not trying to rationally communicate yourself. You're following the arc of the spirit in your heart, because the goal is to cleanse your heart. It works. It'll bring things up like nothing else. It'll bring us face to face with exactly what's really stuck in our lives. And nothing you could do with your body will accomplish the same goal. It's a crucial piece, and it's a big part of why I felt it was most appropriate to say, we're introducing a yogic style which you have to address these other levels at the same time you get good at the physical poses.
Mm-hmm. I think that learning to do that is huge. It's just learning to feel in your heart and like accepting the irrationality of the thoughts, as the thoughts come and you're being shown exactly. It's so honest. It's so honest. And even, and honoring it as it comes and just letting it flow. I find that huge.
It's amazing. And the thing is, it's relentless. You want to force the issue so the heart is the winner of spirit over the mind. Because in almost every case, in almost every person I've worked with, their mind is the actual priority over the heart. The third eye, now, I'm not just saying everything you think about, but your third eye holds your mental references. Now, to be clear, the third eye, there's nothing wrong with the third eye. It's awesome. But when people have dysfunctional thoughts, dysfunctional life patterns and attitudes, you have a sick third eye. In our cultures, we prioritize these patterns. So somebody could be present with their true feelings and feel compelled to explain them, feel compelled to give context. As soon as you're giving context, you leave spirit.
Yeah.
You can't do that if you heartstorm. When you heartstorm, you're saying, I'm staying with the resonance here. I'm not going to say something that pulls me away from the resonance. And it's very simple, but it's super challenging.
It is. It is. It's like, it's exactly what you said. It's so simple in concept, but when you actually start doing it and you're trying to do it, because your body will, like your chakras, your body will try to pull you out, right? So, or at least in my experience. And so you have to stay with it. You really have to stay with it and feel, and it takes practice.
It takes huge practice, and it's developing the ability to just completely let go of whole strains of thought, which many of us were not raised to think that way. When I remember first starting yoga, when I was like, my life was falling apart, I was sitting stuck on that couch, ruminating on everything that I should be doing. I thought I had to kind of treat every thought like a unique person. I had to wrap it up. I had to develop a conclusion. To just leave it and stay focused on your heart is an incredible superpower. Over time, you develop this ability to just be like, oh, that's not the right way.
Yeah. Let it go.
Yeah, just it's not the right way. And you get your attention to stay here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for asserting it, accentuating it, because it's one of the most important reasons I think we have to have these added layers of work to have a healthy practice.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, and there's not just this practice, but also the practice of being witnessed. I find the witnessing in itself. So there are times where I can use the practice where I'll do a heartstorming video and then I just delete it immediately afterwards because I only needed to do it for me. Uh-huh. But there is a real power in being witnessed on things. But not just a power in being witnessed, but because you're exposing a very what's the word? You're exposing a part of yourself that you very rarely even show to yourself.
Exactly. And
sorry, go ahead.
No.
To be so intimate would be a good word for it. To be so intimate with a group of people and there's a huge trust there.
Yeah.
You know, that's beautiful.
It's incredible. And I do think something very special is happening because of the internet that wasn't possible before. What we're talking about is our ability to do these heartstorms in the Wildflower Sanctuary, where there's a space, there's what's called a channel in the program where it's called heartstorming, and people can go there and heartstorm. And the understanding is that it won't necessarily make sense, that it might include weird, confused, deep emotions. That's good, you know. Yeah. And as we develop a sense that that's normal, that we're holding space for this on purpose, it becomes this much easier to do. And the really amusing factor of it is, I'd suggest it's crucial to do it in a way that's witnessed, because we hide from ourselves. Like we were mentioning earlier, it's bizarre, but it's possible to lie to ourselves. Yep. When you heartstorm, you can't really do that. So once someone else has seen it, it kind of like holds us accountable. No, I mean it. I'm really sharing this.
Yes. Those are the ones that I delete.
Well, like, I do too still. And I feel like I shouldn't. But I do give myself that permission, and I encourage people to hold that permission. Yeah. And it does, it brings it more to life. I would suggest if you do delete it, you're probably going to have to do it again eventually.
It's a very interesting practice, and it's not something that I've seen in other yogic circles. So I find it fascinating. I find it very fascinating. And being a practitioner of this and doing this it's been a journey in itself, you know, getting to know, when you get to know yourself and you get to know your heart and you get to hear, there are some things that your heart will tell you that you're taken back for a minute, and in realizing, because you realize, well, my mind doesn't think that at all, you know, and there it is. And it really brings you into this deeper level of awareness of reality, your own reality, and what's really going on. It's a beautiful practice. So I'm glad. Thank you.
Well, a lot of it came out of my work with this teacher. She was actually a therapist. She happened to be a Buddhist, but I know her as my Buddhist therapist because so much of her gift to me was offering me an invitation into this broader space and understanding of reality. So 2 factors. One, she was an EMDR therapist, which is a practice I just deeply respect. Yeah. And it's something that I encourage many people who I work with to do. So we may get to, we will work with trauma in my personal sessions and trauma that comes up in the community through classes. And at a certain point, it becomes important to connect someone to a trauma therapist. And that's what EMDR is. Now, the way EMDR works is it's called eye motion desensitivity resistance. And it's the idea that patterns of trauma are held in spiritual resonance in our body, and it affects our physical form. So it teaches you to stay present with what you're feeling and only talk while you're present. So you focus until you have a clear thought or feeling, and then you share. I had a huge level of breakthroughs in EMDR, first dealing with my own trauma, and then she apprenticed me and she taught me how to be a practitioner myself, with a smirk on her face because she knew she was unleashing me. She thought it was very funny because she knew full well I'd do what I've done, which is be like, okay, you all have to learn about your past lives. And she worked in my community. She's very well respected in this community, but she did not announce that she was taking people on past life regressions. She was working with Cornell professors and, you know, the doctors. She was very well regarded, but she kept it on the down low, and she knew that wasn't my personality. So, you know, I'm out here making a YouTube channel saying, look, guys, what you just mentioned, Angie, is that when you keep doing this work, you're digging beneath the surface, you're digging beneath the surface, you're digging beneath the surface. You're going to crack open sides of your personality, which you know are yours, but you've never been thinking about.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you start getting in relationship to your past lives. And it's unavoidable. One of the reasons I think we have such incredible media, why people are addicted to shorts, the fractured mental state of shifting, ads that go, like I can't even watch movies anymore. They change frames so quickly, I have no idea what they're doing. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's not fun. You know? But I think it's designed to be fun. I think it's designed to distract people from the truth of their existence.
Yeah.
And the reason is because beneath your traumas is a relationship to your past lives. Yep. And at a certain point, you don't get to entertain it as just like a goofy, oh, wow, isn't that neat? It's true. The Buddhists and the yogis know this. They live in frames of reference where, of course, and we lack that. And that's one of the reasons, to circle around to the beginning of this, it's one of the reasons yoga is such incredible medicine. It's not just the physical gift. It's that it's tuning our energy into a way of life that is able to incorporate this breadth of existence. As Sadhguru says, the cosmic chaos that we live within. Indians love their cosmic chaos. They love living surrounded by the truth of all these factors. Westerners love living in these blinders, where somebody who can run 100 miles is our biggest goal. Somebody who can block out their pain and keep going. That's a hero in this context.
Yeah.
And to be conscious that can be very damaging. And in fact, we can be missing some of the best parts of life. But in order to embrace them, in order to embrace your full feeling, you have to be willing to get in touch with these parts of yourself where you remember what it felt like to be in a war. You remember what it felt like to be a homesteader, afraid that your grain was going to run out. To have to cope with the intensity of the presence of those feelings is daunting.
To worrying about freezing to death because you might have frozen to death in a past life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how they can affect the life that you're in right now. There are ways that they can affect
tremendously.
Yeah. So when you start getting underneath, it just takes you so deep.
It does. And it's crucial that we develop social structures that can accept it. And before we have that, we need to have more tight-knit communities where at least we can be real together. And that's what we're doing in the sanctuary through Wildflowerfire in general.
One of the things that I personally have found very beneficial from the sanctuary is I grew up we expressed our feelings, but not overly. Like we weren't allowed to really delve into what we were feeling. They were often cut off, and then we were told to act appropriately, right?
Very British.
Yes. Yes, we're very European.
Charlie, please take your hat off at the table. Your fork is on the wrong side.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
So we repressed a lot. And so what I'm seeing in my family now, I see these very different dynamics, right? But as a child from repressing, and then when I came into the sanctuary, I had to learn to be present for people. And I still struggle with this sometimes. I had to learn to be present for people as a witness.
Yeah.
And to be able to honor what they're going through and honor their space. And as when I reflect back on my childhood with that, I feel the cutoff, and I understand that I don't want to do that for other people. One of the biggest things that I personally struggle with is figuring out how to respectfully hold space in a way where I'm not poking them. I don't want to poke them, and I don't want to talk down in any which way. I want to, you want to say the right thing. But what I think that it helps with, it shows you how to be a healer, really. And it, you develop almost a sixth sense with it, where you can understand how to come in and how to hold a role, how to play a role, and just hold that space in a gentle manner without pushing your energy in their space, if that makes sense.
And this is yet again why I think it's so crucial we integrate the role of being some form of energetic healer, spiritual guide, along with teaching a more straightforwardly yogic class or even meditation class. Because as you're saying, you need to develop this ability to be a healer in some form in order to hold space for someone.
It's a skill.
So this, I think, two of the most crucial factors, we've only addressed one of them. One factor is spiritual awakening can be very lonely. So when you see things in other people, there can be this impulse to share that's actually coming from a neediness. Like, don't leave me alone in this awareness. I need to have company, which taps into all the levels of fear and isolation that you go through when you're awakening spiritually. I assert again and again, you need to accept that level of loneliness and isolation. It's designed to take us out of human culture and to bring us face to face with God, by whatever name you use, the divine presence. You are supposed to get a direct tap to that and not need other people as a crutch in the way of it. Then we could circle around and come back into community, and we're starting to see these things. You need to be able to retain that connection and trust you're not alone. You always have this divine presence. Let that be more important so you can hold space for others. And along with that, I think there can be this urge to push at other people, which a conscious mind thinks you're trying to be helpful.
Yes.
But really, you're trying to deflect yourself from taking on their energy. So you're actually pushing them away. You're speaking to something intimate, but it's like, don't put that on me. And the reason this matters so much is circling back to that, like I can see two different people in a room. Like I performed for 3 years. So I'm always going to the same place hanging out. I know people pretty well, the regulars. I could take a break from performing and I could talk to one person and then I could talk to someone else on the other side of the room and I know they've bonded deeply that night because they're both carrying the same base resonance. Right? The reason that's possible is because when we're connecting with someone intimately, we're exchanging energy deeply. When you're not conscious of that, you take all sorts of stuff on from other folks without knowing that you're doing it. And you wake up spiritually, you start to realize it. You get a little paranoid, right? It's legitimately like, I don't want your shit, you know? And it's a huge point of focus that really needs a lot of attention. And poking at them, trying to be their healer. Everybody's trying to give somebody else their spiritual advice. You know, like there's this one guy, he's like, I'll give you a session. And he's like giving 5 people a session. I did this again and again and again. And I know myself. I did not have clear boundaries. And I would do that as a way to assert my presence, to help myself know myself.
Yeah.
Other people will accept it because they don't necessarily feel great about themselves. But the reality is I didn't know how to keep my boundaries in silence. I didn't know how. So I was being pushy with guidance and advice in order to sort of preserve my sense of strength and self. And it's crucial to learn this.
Yeah.
And then I went to a house and another guy did it better than me. And he was aggressive. And I started to watch what it looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just walking up to people and saying, why do you carry so much anger? Like he was just off the hook, right? He wasn't even beginning to ask people's permission. And it was definitely, like you say, you know, that dominoes thing you described? For me, this was spirit telling me, don't do that.
Yes.
This is not healthy. Do not run around poking people, as you put it. And respect why. The reason you're doing that is it's a self-protection mechanism for people, very highly empathic spiritual people.
Yeah.
And you got to develop a better way. And the better way is a strong practice. When you have a strong practice, you carry the confidence that even if you take something on really intensely, you're going to be able to shed it. You'll be able to get out of it. You'll be able to restore yourself. And so you walk around with a little bit more. It's like, okay, yeah, I took some ick on, but I don't need to be paranoid about it. I'll digest it. It's not great, but you don't have to be afraid.
Exactly.
And so there's so many gifts to being able to trust your practice, and 20 minutes will do it. Seriously, you know, like you might have to build your heart rate, do something a little difficult, but 20 minutes will do it. You'll reclaim yourself. You'll know who you are, and you won't have to be concerned that you're taking on too much empathically.
That's exactly it. And I found the sanctuary and still find the sanctuary very beneficial. So if anybody wants to join the sanctuary, it's www.wildflowerfire.com. We have Volley, which is an app that we use with it. It's fantastic. It's only $10 a month.
For the moment.
For the moment. That's
I
right.
keep
For
trying
the moment. And it's a really fantastic group of people who come together and share their spiritual experiences, share their spiritual awakenings. And you really, like, as a practitioner, or even just as somebody who's learning, you learn so much from doing your practices and then observing it, and even coming into the sanctuary gives you a sacred space that you can practice what you're learning. And what I've been learning is that there's many different ways of practicing, and sometimes just observing and just seeing what other people are doing, the interactions really teaches you, because as adults, we leave school, we go to work, we're working with people, but our interactions with people are fairly limited within our circles. So this kind of broadens our spectrum of being able to interact with different people from different cultures all over the world. And it gives you a way of learning from people that you otherwise wouldn't have that advantage. I've found it extremely beneficial.
Would it be fair to say, because this is almost an inadvertent gift, but I find that the asynchronous nature, meaning it's very intimate. We're posting videos. It's quite easy to record a video. Just press a button and then press post. So you don't have to like record it and upload it and edit it or anything. So it's very immediate and personal. And yet you can wait. So it's on your time schedule. You, Angie, can post something last night and I can say I'm not ready to be present with that yet. And I haven't, when we're together in person, we have to be on the same vibe in terms of time. When you're ready to share, if I'm not watching you, I haven't been there. I haven't caught you. But in this, it teaches a different depth of patience and respect, I find.
Yes.
I can share something. Occasionally, it's been very personal, and I'll go back quickly and be like, did anyone watch it? And then I could kind of laugh at myself because it's like, hey, just let people be present when they're ready. And I found like last week, I posted something, someone watched it 5 days later and offered such loving insight. So it's like when we give each other space to witness when we're ready, we get a much deeper quality of witnessing. So there's this incredible gift. It's too bad we don't all live together, but in a way, there are these benefits that we would never get if we all had to meet at the same time every week.
Well, exactly. And if you really think about it, if you think of each person who comes in and is interacting, how many lives are being touched just from each of our interactions?
Yeah.
Like that in itself to me is so beautiful, and we don't even realize the impact that we're having.
No, we don't. And the beauty of having connections in different places in the world is it does give that sense of breadth, that sense that, I can think of one person here and one person here and one person here, and it gives a sense of like, wow, we really are reaching the world, which is a beautiful openness.
It is. It is.
So I just really appreciate the attentiveness, and I appreciate your initiative. You are living this the way I want it to be lived. That you're embracing the level in which you're empowered. You understand immediately this. You're learning to be your own guru, and I love it. I'm adamant that at some point you're going to need to have veins in which you can share this with others. But maybe we can make that. I'd love to make that all through the sanctuary. Yeah,
very, very inspiring.
There's something moving better.
Yeah, I feel it. I can feel the difference. I don't know how to explain what I feel, but I feel it. I really feel it.
Thank you for being a part of it, and thank you for this time. I really think it's valuable to have these conversations.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Bless you, Angie. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care of yourself. Be curious. Be curious in your practice, and let us know how fasting engagements go. All right.
I will. Thanks, Daniel. Have a
Bless
great
you,
day.
Angie.
Bless you.